It's been a minute. Yeah, I haven't been in the living room for a while. I just got off a Jeffy show. Lovely show. Fantastic. Seeing old friends. Um, yeah, and I haven't done too much in the leg room. Josh has been down here trying to complete. We got this set for a wholesale price, so why not? And so Josh has been trying to put this together for a week or two, and I just finished up during Jeff's show. Thanks, Jeff. It's a cute set. It's a Batman Technic motorcycle. I see the box over there, but the instructions are right here. 42155. I'm not going to do a review on it. But it was a fun build. I like building Technic still to this day. I still like older Technic better. But I thought before I go to bed, because I'm over. I'm not sick anymore. I had a nice little cough. Wasn't COVID. Tested a few times. But it was an upper respiratory viral, so no medication. But I think with all the hacking and coughing, that my throat is very, very it needs time to heal. So I've been every once in a while. It's just very, very annoying. But into each and every life, a little rain must fall. So I'm not gonna lose any sleep over it. But it's been, I don't know. This is a topic that is not Lego related at all. This is a personal life topic. And so for those of you who are still here after 2 minutes, this has nothing to do with Lego. It doesn't come up as much as it used to. So without quote unquote too many tangents. I've tried to make this video like a half a dozen times so far. So it's over the last bunch of years, and I just delete it because it gets off to like an hour and a half, and because I can go on for an hour and a half, but I just delete it and say screw it, nobody needs to know. And I always get to the point, do I want to talk about it? Because overall it's not forgotten, but it's gone, the issue. So I moved here into this house in 2000 and I want to say 3, which is this year actually. So this is my 20th anniversary in this house. I bought this house. I wasn't with anybody at the time. As a matter of, I won't go into why I bought this house because there's a whole whatever nuance there. But I bought this house in 2003. Took ownership in August of 2003, so it's over 20 years now. And I lived here on my own for a year and a half before I met Sandy. And then I met Sandy, and then we dated, and then she moved in, then we got engaged, then we got married. So we got married in 2006. So that wasn't that long ago. We're coming up to 20 years pretty soon, but we just celebrated, excuse me, fantastic. Our 19th, 18th, whatever, anniversary for dating. And our 17th wedding anniversary is coming up soon. And so we lived here, Sandy and I, after we dated. And then so Sandy and I were living here and married, and right next door on that wall, because this is a townhouse complex, so there's this wall, there's a unit, and that wall, there's a unit on the other side of the walls. There was a wonderful person. Her name was Holly. She was adorable. She lived on her own. Her grandmother owned the unit before she did, and her grandmother bought the unit originally when they first built them in 1974, 1975. And her grandmother lived there until her grandmother sold the unit to Holly before I moved into my unit. So Holly had been living there, and I bought this unit in 2004. And she was a fantastic neighbor. We talked, hi, how's it going? I took in her mail when she was on vacation. She took in my mail when I was on vacation. Not that I went on vacation a lot, living on my own. And she was wonderful. And she was there when Sandy moved in. And she was there for a few years. And then she met somebody. and they got married, and they moved to Virgil. So, bye, Holly, miss you. And she sold her house to a young couple. And this is where the story starts. I'm 5 minutes into this. The couple at the beginning of living next door to us were cordial, and they had 2 young kids, and we exchanged birthday cards. We didn't have Josh yet, but we exchanged birthday cards for their kids and little presents that we picked up, whatever. So we got along pretty well with the neighbors at the beginning. But around 2010, as they say, the wheels started coming off the wagon. And this is where I always start with this story, and I get into it, and I go through the whole thing, and then an hour and a half goes by, and I just delete it. Because nobody needs to. It's so hard to explain clearly in a short amount of time. But the wheels started going off the wagon in 2010. And I'm going to do a lot of compression of the story and just hit the highlights, because there's a whole thing behind it. So in 2010, the insults started. Oh, it stinks out here. Hey, fatso, whatever. Anytime the mom was outside, she was hurling insults at Sandy mostly, and at me, Lego boy. I was Lego boy all of a sudden, because I was still doing shows and stuff, and they knew I was doing shows and whatever. And so the insults started. And then we did not purposely insult back. I said to Sandy, and Sandy and I sat and talked about it, that it would just escalate, because this is what it is. And so, but it got to the point where we had to get police involved. Like, it wasn't just insult. It wasn't just words. There was vandalism. There was gunk thrown in our driveway, and dog poo, and blah, 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 on our sidewalks, and stuff smeared on our door, and blah, blah, blah. And so, there's a whole bunch of time that goes by. But we had to buy security cameras around our house. That's when all that stopped. The barbecue was left on in the back deck, and I go out there to barbecue, and the tank is empty, and all the knobs are turned on. And I'm going, well, this has got to stop, because that's life-threatening. And so we called the cops, and blah, blah, blah. The cops come down, and blah, blah, blah. And they talked to us, they talked to them, and they basically, on that specific instance, when you mentioned the barbecue was left on high and not lit, they told them next door, this is before we had the security cameras, so we couldn't assert that it was them, but who else would it be? And the cops told them, basically, it's hearsay, but just letting you know that if our unit blows up, so does theirs. And then it stopped. And surprisingly, it never happened again. But it's just one microcosm in a litany of incidents and whatever, get confrontations, blah, blah, blah. Her husband at the beginning was trying to stop her from being this loudmouth, whatever. But then he started, I don't know, just to keep the marriage going, which, whatever, he started attacking, he started insulting, he started whatever. The police kept on coming down because, there was some death threats in there. I mentioned vandalisms and whatever, and our garden was wrecked. We have that on security camera. Blah, blah. So, and then about 2015, after Sandy and I have been putting up with this for 5 years now, people are saying, you have to move. You move out of there. And I'm going, there's a whole reason why I didn't move, why we didn't move. But in the end, the board had to get involved. And back then, of course, the board got involved, the condo board got involved, because it wasn't just us they were attacking neighbors on the other side, they were attacking people who lived in the complex. There was a colored couple that lived by the front, and their kids were the same age as the kids next door, and they were getting on the bus, and there was some racial comments, like really harsh, bad racial, and then confrontations and whatever with other people in the complex. So the board got involved. And the board, we have a lawyer on retainer for other things, but the lawyers got involved now. So we got the cops, we got the lawyers, we got the board now sending them cease and desist letters saying, stop, don't have to be neighborly. You don't have to but you can't keep on attacking your neighbors when people are out for walking on the block. So the board got involved, and then the board got the lawyer involved, which said, here's the listing of things that you're doing that has to stop immediately or else we'll escalate it. And then because that happened and they didn't de-escalate, and every step in this whole process, they escalated their attacks on people. And so what happened then was that in a condo corporation, in this kind of instance, you can't go straight to the courts anymore to get them evicted. And they can't be evicted because they own their house or they paid a mortgage. Not that they did, but they had a mortgage. You have to go through a process. And in the process was mediation, arbitration, and then finally court. If the mediation doesn't work, then you go to arbitration. If the arbitration doesn't work, you have to go to court. So the mediation's not legally binding, but you have to be there. And even at the mediation failed because they didn't bother showing up because it's not legally binding. They didn't bother showing up. So then we had to find an arbitrator and get the arbitration started. And I'll make a little microcosm, a little snippet of here. She was in the court for the appointment of the arbitrator, the neighbor, because they wouldn't. Our lawyer was sending him letters. Here's the list of arbitrators we want to arbitrate this issue between 6 or 7 units, the board, the property management team, and the neighbors. Like there was a whole. It wasn't just Sandy and me. It was like 7 or 8 plaintiffs against them, and so the arbitrator, our lawyer kept on saying, "Here's a list of arbitrators. You have to agree with us which one to pick," and they wouldn't for a year. We're not picking. We're not at fault. Blah blah blah. Everybody else is like bad words and blah blah. And so eventually we had to take them to, not me, but the lawyers took them to court, so the court can appoint an arbitrator. And what happened there was, and I wasn't in the room, but I heard from the lawyer, is that at the beginning of the selection of the arbitration, so the judge is there, our lawyer's there with whatever, and they're over there by themselves, by the way, because the lawyer that they had hired to to go into this, had fired them, let them go right before the arbitration because we have to submit our affidavits. And up until this point, Sandy and I were keeping a log file, and the other neighbors were keeping a log file, and other people were keeping an incident file. And our incident file was already 500 incidents long of incidents with these neighbors and the vandalisms and whatever, and the police and blah, blah, blah. And so that had to be disclosed to them before the arbitration selection. And their lawyer read through all the affidavits from the 7 or 8 different plaintiffs. And their lawyer says, we can't represent you. We cannot represent you in this. You're going to lose. And so right before the arbitration picking of the arbitrator, the lawyers dismissed them. And so they showed up at the court on their own. The 2 of them, husband and wife, showed up at the court. And again, I wasn't there, but our lawyer told us afterwards. And so the judge comes in. Our guys are sitting there. They're sitting over there. The judge comes in and he says, wait, before we even start the selection process of the arbitrator, what's outstanding? What? And our lawyer gets up and says, they've already incurred $10,000 worth of, lawyer letters and costs and whatever, because everything that you do in the condo corporation that costs the condo corporation money gets charged back to you. And they hadn't paid anything yet. They were already in arrears, $10,000. Because the failed mediation, they didn't show up. So that was charged back to them. The legal letters back and forth, blah, 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 gets charged back to them. And so our lawyer gets up and says that that couple there owes $10,000 of outstanding costs. And the judge says, in order to facilitate a better, way of moving forward, the corporation itself has to eat the $10,000. So the couple does not owe the $10,000 at all. And this is just to appoint the arbitrator. We're not even close to the end yet. And it's and I'm going to say this, and I've said this from the get-go. It's a sound and valid judgment of the judge. I am not going to fault the judge at all. I think if I was in his shoes and being trying to be unbiased, it's a perfectly legitimate way of starting the arbitration process, because you don't want to start off on unequal footing. That they're already pissed because they owe 10 grand, and the corporation, for whatever reason, we can't, but the corporation can eat the money. So the judge says, free and clear to the couple, you do not owe $10,000. I'm forgiving that. The corporation has to eat the $10,000. They have to pay for it out of their budget and whatever. She opens her mouth in court to the judge. Now, again, I don't know what she said, but it was bad, according to the lawyer, our lawyer. The judge looked at her, bangs his gavel down, and charges them back $7,500. So to be clear, they were free and clear of 10 grand. They didn't owe. There was zero money owed from all the arrears and all the letters and whatever. She opens her mouth for 30 seconds. The judge, $7,500 you owe. You have to pay the $7,500 back to the corporation now. She couldn't keep her mouth shut in court. And my whole point was, from the beginning, from 2010, and this is 2016, 2017 now, no matter what we did or what we didn't do, we weren't even home half the time. Sandy and I would be going out a lot because we don't want to be around this and whatever, and being in the house. So we went out of our way not to interface with the neighbors. We hear them going because they were loud as anything. We knew when they were going out. So we don't have to go out right now. We'll just go have a coffee, watch more TV, and then we'll go out afterwards. Like, we did change our lives. We weren't scared, but it's just to reduce the friction between us and them. I'm not here to exacerbate the situation at all. Every single step I tried to decrease, reduce the exacerbation, the conflict. I started off just by knocking on their door one night. I knock, hey, nice neighbor lady, can you please keep it down? Because it's 3:00 in the morning, your kids are stomping around like it's like high noon. And we just had Joshua and he's trying to get some sleep. And she slammed the door in my face. And she did that 6 times. Because I try. The 7th time I just called bylaw, right? It's not that I'm going to call bylaw the first time, because that's not what we do. We try, we put the effort in and blah, blah, blah. So we honestly tried to reduce the aggravation, to reduce the exacerbation, so to de-escalate. And every single step, they escalated. And so anyway, so the arbitrator was appointed by the judge, and they owed $7,500. And then the arbitration happened a year later. We had to get all our ducks in a row. And so the arbitration happened, and the arbitrator listened to the 5 or 6 or 7 people that were there, and he listened to them. And then he released a huge document of all the points. Boom, 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 boom. He says they had no valid response to all our incidents, because Sandy and I, again, kept a huge incident report, specifics. July 29th, 2012, we stepped out and she said, hey, stinky pants, whatever it was, we documented it. We had a little running Word document on the laptop inside the house there. So every time we left the house and there was an incident, we come home and read it out that day. And that was submitted in our affidavits all the time. So anyway, so the arbitration happened. We gave up and gave our testimony. They were allowed to cross-examine us. She, later, neighbor lady, attacked Sandy on the stand. On the stand, it's in virtual, not virtual, but it was in a hotel room, boardroom, and so it was set up like a court, but there was no audience. And so our judge was our lawyer was there, and they were representing themselves again. And the rest of us would sit there, and then we got up and, our lawyer would ask us questions about what we'd gone through and blah, 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 basically reinforcing our affidavits. And then they were allowed to cross-examine us. And it was just so, it was 100% attack. There was no legitimacy there, blah, blah, blah. There was not one legitimate question that they could ask me or Sandy or whatever. It was just like, for the love of everything. So we get through that. And then we have to wait for the arbitrator to make his remarks and submit his findings. That took a little bit of time while they're still attacking us. And so the arbitrator basically had this huge bunch of points, blah, blah, blah. And he went and consulted other legal precedents in the area. And he says, this is what I believe us, what we said, all the 7 or 8 other witnesses. Don't believe them, blah, blah, blah. They might say they're being put upon, but they're not being put upon. Nobody's attacking them, blah, blah. And so he says, here's what has to happen in 18 points or whatever, number of points. Don't bug your neighbors. Don't engage with your neighbors, blah, 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 all the way down to them. And that didn't work at all. And that now is legally binding, by the way. And when the arbitrator releases his findings, it's legally binding. And also the arbitrator charged, because in an arbitration, the arbitrator has all the monies that are owed and whatever, who owes what. And now it's about $40,000 to get to this point, 40 grand, including the $7,500 they hadn't paid for earlier. And so he assigned, and he says it's not an attack on them, but he says it's over 90% of that $40,000 of the costs so far are charged back to them. So they owe 40%. Actually, it was 43,000, 90%, 40 grand they owed them. The corporation owes 3 grand. So that was pretty high in the grand scheme of our other arbitrations like this, but the litany of wrongness that they were doing, he says 90%. They pay 10%, condo pays. So fine. Of course, they didn't pay. So it goes on for that. So the arbitrator's findings comes out, and the time still goes on. They're still attacking us. They wrecked our front. They absolutely, on camera, they knew the camera because they were throwing fingers at the camera and up this and like whatever as they're ripping apart our front garden. And so that went into evidence for whatever. And so our lawyer starts getting ready to take this in front of a judge it's called forced sale. I'll still call it eviction, but it's not an eviction because they're not renting. Our lawyer was going after them to sell their house and move away. So that's what was going on. So July of 2018, so 5 years ago, July of 2018, July 31st, 2018, I actually remember the date. We were in court with the judge. And again, we don't have to give testimony at this one. This one is just 100% them and the corporate lawyer, because here's the arbitrations and where they failed. Here's all our affidavits. We were there in the auditorium or whatever, the audience, just in case. But our lawyer says you probably won't be called up at all. So we were there the entire day, and there's a whole wonderful stories about the day of court that I will remember for the rest of my life. But in the end, the judge comes in. Our lawyer's there. There's a whole bunch of us in the seats inside the courtroom. President of the board, few friends from the board. One of my friends showed up just for supporting us, and they're not there. They didn't show up. They were summoned. They were notified. Our lawyer says, here's the registered mail that was sent to them. They didn't show up for court on July 31st to justify or try to save their house, because this is the judgment to kick them out of their house. And the judge, gave him time to show up, and he didn't. And then he's like, okay, start. So our lawyer stands up. He starts going into he's got the whole spiel ready. Hey, judge, I know we're asking for some extraordinary measures, kicking somebody out of their house. The judge says, stop. Lawyer, I read through the whole report, and he had a binder on his desk, a folder on his desk that was about that thick. And I know our affidavits were in there. The arbitration report was in there. Our incident report was in there, like the whole thing. He says, I read through the whole thing, going right back to the beginning. He said, I read through the whole thing. I'm going to find for you and your corporation. So what do you want? And so our lawyer says 90 days. The judge says, done. So again, my investigation showed in the history of Canada, a judge kicking somebody out of their house when money is not a factor. Well, there's a factor for us, but money was not a factor in this. I did a lot of research over those 8 years that I could only find 10 legitimate people getting kicked out of their units that they owned, condo corporations, but their units. There was one, the first one was in Toronto. There was this lady that was just attacking everybody, and they finally, had enough of it. But I found only 10 in Canada where people were actually kicked out of their unit. It's called a forced sale. that has nothing to do with money, nothing to do with wills or whatever, just you're a complete jackass and we're kicking you out of the house. And so we are one of those. It's like, wow. And so the judge pulls on the gavel. They had 90 days to get out. So I get home that night after the court case where they were kicked out of their house in 90 days. I'm walking up the front pathway. They're coming out of their house. They just laid into me like every other day. Look at stupid boy, look at Lego boy, look at the jackass. And I'm going in my head, you were just kicked out of your house today and you're still yipping like you weren't kicked out of your house today. They got 90 days to get out, to get the house ready for market, to sell and get out. So July to November was very tough for us because they were completely uncontrolled after that. Like, it was constant smashing on the wall. It was constant barraging of bad words and like harassing us when we're outside. Their mom comes over, the dad comes over, a brother comes over. It was just horrendously bad for those 3 months here at this house. My friends stopped coming over to the house. They didn't come over for coffee. And we have an open door policy. I mentioned this before. Your neighbor come over for coffee. My friends stopped coming over here because they don't want to listen to this, and they don't want their kids listening to this because it was foul, it was profane, it was vulgar. Like the background stuff is she's blatantly cheating on her husband and going out having bad stuff and coming home like at 1 o'clock in the morning so he can go to his night shift work. And she's like coming back from her little dalliances, shall we say, with many people from, again, what we're hearing through the walls. And he's putting up with it. But anyway, so it just went right off the rails. It's like, oh my God. Anywho, so it gets down to October, November. They finally move away. We finally have peace in our time. We finally have the peace. I am glossing over so many things. So all of a sudden we have peace and quiet, but it didn't end there at all, because not only did these people live a filthy mental, emotionally, intellectually lifestyle, because they were abusive to their kids, which again talked about, which I glossed over. There was abuse there. There was a whole bunch of stuff. They lived a filthy lifestyle, but they lived a physically filthy lifestyle because 3 days after they left, we started getting cockroaches in our house. And I'm going, I've never ever seen a cockroach in my life wherever I lived. And I lived in a bunch of different places. I've never seen one. And they started coming into our house. So because I live in a condo corporation that has a retainer for a pest control service, they come over. And because not only our place, but the house on the other side of that unit, they had exactly the same problem. And so he comes over and he had a key to this unit because it was now sold. And the people who bought it couldn't go into their house yet because as soon as you walk in the front door, and this is what the pest control guy told me when he came over to do our place, their unit and the unit next door. He walked in the front foyer of the house and there's dozens of cockroaches in the foyer, completely out in the open. He walked through the entire house, hundreds and hundreds of cockroaches. And the place was a complete sty. And so he says, what's going to happen is he's going to have to spray our house first, and then the unit on the other side second, and then do their house last, the center one last. And he says this is the first time in his career where he had to spray himself coming out of the building because they were crawling on him. There were so many cockroaches in that house. Filthy lifestyle. Also, after they were booted out, the problem is that they just found a place a couple blocks away, and their mom lives just down the street, is that we would sometimes see each other and they would still lay into us. You were kicked out of your house. You were kicked out of your house because of what you're doing. Now, again, we didn't care because they were gone. And they through 2 or 3 times that we crossed paths over since 2018. It's only been 2 or 3 times. But they laid into us. And I'm going, what kind of mental problem? Because again, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychologist. But what kind of deficiency do you have to keep on doing this? It's like, let it go. I tell you all this, and again, I've overall really have forgotten about it, but every once in a while, I wrote a book, and this is why I usually delete this video, because I don't want to promote myself. So what had happened as closer to the end, 2017, 2016, it was after the arbitration, I think it was after the arbitration, but before the court case, I wanted to start compiling all our stuff into one cohesive folder, because we had our incident report, which was now almost dozens of pages long, with like 800 to 1,000 different incidents. Like we didn't log every incident, but we still had 800 to 1,000 incidents. We had Facebook posts where she was attacking us directly. We had audio files, because we would put our phone on recording and leave it in our back like in our living room to hear the noise coming through the wall at 3 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that. We had video from our security camera system that we had to install because of these people, and we had the police reports, the dozens of police reports, and so I had a whole file full of this stuff, and our arbitration, our affidavits, blah blah. So I started compiling everything into one cohesive document, going from 2010 to 20 whatever that date was, because we weren't at the court yet. And as I was compiling all this stuff into one cohesive document, I realized that in our incident report, we would put 2 or 3 lines: stepped out of the house, God called a faggot. Like, they use words like that. That's really, and again, whatever, and worse, and whatever, and then the gunk and whatever. So 2 or 3 lines, I said, doesn't cut it. And there were some specific incidents, like the death threats and the wrecking of our garden, that required kind of an exposition. And so at the key points to this entire thing, the arbitration, the mediation, I fleshed out into a mini story, like a short story. This is what happened the day of the arbitration. This is what happened the day she gave us a death threat. This is what happened when we talked with the police this one time, blah, blah, blah. Like, not just a 5-line or 3-line incident report that was in our incident. I fleshed out all the key critical things. And then, because I had then the whole thing compiled into one Word document, that's what I kept on updating as we got closer to the court date, and then after the court date, those 3 months after the court date, where it was really stupid. And so I just kept on writing the story as it was happening. So live, basically. This is what happened today. There was an ambulance at the house, and that's a whole other story. There was threats of whatever CAS was called, whatever it was, and then I flash out the whole story. And so and then for me, 100%, this was therapy. It was, I love to read, and I love to write. I love to talk sometimes. So this was 100% therapy for me to get over, or to put the issue to bed, basically, as it were. And so, but every once in a while, a friend says, "Oh, Dave, I heard that you wrote that book about the neighbors." And it's come in handy a few times, because a few people who live in condo corporations elsewhere have run into some issues with neighbors, and they want some help. Now, again, this is not a self-help book. This is not a book at all for help. It is not a legal book. I am not a lawyer. And so I put that in the proviso of this book. This is not a legal document, nor should be considered anything legal in this at all. If you have legal issues, consult a lawyer. So this is just my book of what we went through from my point of view, detailing things that happened during the 8 years, and then a little bit afterwards, and then there's a write-up at the back. So I did publish it, self-publishing, KDP, Amazon, and I think I sold about 10 copies. So I'm a published author, but every once in a while I'll have to, because I don't have enough in the house, because people sporadically will ask for one. So I'll just order 5 more, and we just got a lot just a couple months back. And when I get this, I give it a read. Sandy cannot, and I will not, and I absolutely do not want her reading this, because she opens up to the first page and her anxiety just goes through the roof. Because most of that horrid person, the most horrid person that I personally have ever met in my entire life, and I've met a lot of bad people. I have not led a naive life. I've lived a very blessed life because I've had beautiful people, like tons, including you guys, tons of beautiful people in my life. Tons. Overall, 99.9% of people who've come into my life, including virtually, have been salt of the earth, the most wonderful people you ever want to meet. But I've also, because I've lived and I've done, moved around, and I've met some pretty horrendous people. And not that I stay around them, because I'm not interested in this kind of lifestyle, and I'll move over there. So, but in my life, in my personal experience, there are worse people on the planet. Guaranteed there are worse people on the planet than that horrid person that lived next door for those bunch of years. But they've never been in my life. She is easily the worst person who ever interfaced with me, period. It's not even close competition. So, I was going somewhere with that. So I wanted to detail stuff for posterity, shall we say. That's exactly what it is. I wanted to detail for posterity what had happened, because again, as time goes on, your memory fades of certain things that happen. And so every once in a while, I'll pick up this book and I'll just, all right. Not to like reopen old wounds, but first of all, I like my writing. I watch these videos, by the way. Every once in a while, I'll just pick a video that I made for whatever reason. It's not ego. Hey, what was I talking about that day? But so basically, the book is broken up into 3 parts-ish. There's the beginning, which is only basically a page from 2006 when they first moved in, to 2010, where things went off the wagon. From 2010 to 2015, it was just me and Sandy, as far as we knew, that we're putting up with them. So that's a whole bunch of chapters. And then 2015 to April 2018, that's from the board involvement. The board started getting involved in 2015 to the arbitration, which also includes the mediation, but that failed because they didn't show up. So from 2015 to 2018, April 2018, the arbitration. And from April 2018, so this is 2026 to 2010, it's a page. From 2010 to 2015 is a bunch of chapters, but that's over 5 years. From 2015 to April 2018, which is only 3 years, basically 2.5 years, this is all that. And then from April 2018 to July 2018, which is arbitration to the court, is that big for those 3 months. And then from July 2018 to they're out, is that big. So starts off slow. We still kept track. That's where basically the majority of the police reports were. And then the wrap up, after 2018, I wrote a bunch of my thoughts. Now, also, if you look at the author of this book, it's not my name. It's a pseudonym, because I don't need this. I don't need my name in writing. And so all the people, all the events, the events are exactly what happened, but all the people's names have been changed 100%. So you will not know, if you read this book, you will not know who those people actually were. You won't. Again, that's legal reasons. First of all, I don't need somebody coming back to me and saying, slander is spoken, libel is written. This would be libelous, but it wasn't. If libel is only bad or legally or illegal if it's not true, and everything in this book, from my point of view, is true. So I did change everybody's name, including mine, Sandy's, and Josh's. We are all in this book, but we're all different named. The president, the lawyer, every single thing was changed. It doesn't give an address. It doesn't give a unit number. It's not our unit number. Nothing in this book that corresponds to a physical place or a physical person is the same as it is in real life. Everything else in this book that had happened, and it's detailed. I'm actually, I am, for me, because I know I like my writing style, I always did. So I like to put my mind on hold and know that I lived through this and just read it as a book, a nonfiction. This is what some couple went through. And what I've also found out is that there's a whole bunch of other people out there in Canada and the United States. I seem to find them on the TikToks and on the YouTubes and on the Facebooks who have gone through not anything like we went through. Because I found that what we went through was exceptional in some instances. There are people out there have had worse abuse on specific instances, on specific things, but not over the 10-year period or the 8-year period that we had, and not the escalation. It's usually like rah, 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 and then it's done, right? So, but I do follow. I've read up on other people's problems when it comes to neighbors and not getting along, and how they dealt with it. I do very much detail at the end of this book why I handled the entire 8 years the way I handled it, which was not to be confrontational. And a lot of people say that's because it was a cowardly way out. And I'm going, you're 100% wrong. And so I'm going to wrap this up video by saying this. My whole point from the get-go, and I even detailed it in this book, because I remember the exact conversation I had with Sandy at the beginning of all this, really early off. I said, no matter what we do or what we do not do, they're going to attack us. They're going to attack us. It's built into them. Gandhi could be living in it. Gandhi himself could be living in his house, and they would still attack him. So it doesn't matter who we are. It's not personal to us. We're just the ones experiencing it because we're right next door. But they're not attacking us for who we are. They're just attacking us because it's who they are. They have literally no other hope, no other help, no other charm, no other happiness. This is where they are deriving their sense of self, is attacking literally anybody else, to put others down, to make them feel better about themselves. Period. There's no other justification at all that I could find about anything. They attacked Sandy for things that never happened. They attacked me for whatever. They insulted. That's because that's all they could do to find a brief sense of happiness and to demeaning and deprecating or depreciating others. That's where they derive their happiness from. So it doesn't matter who the others are, as we found out, because the other neighbors, and then it became their own family, because crazy couple next door divorced now because she turned on him. And we told him that. I said, it's in this book, Paul, she'll turn on you. She'll turn on you. So in the end, it's not that I'm vindicated, because I'll also say this, and this is my understanding of watching everything. I might be oblivious to many things, but I do observe people and situations, whatever. When you are in front of a judge, because I watch a lot of court shows, when you are in front of a judge, you better make sure your nose is clean. as a colloquial, as